Extreme, off the chart high lead. Yeah, exactly. Obviously discovering that the high lead depletes methylation. That's why we couldn't raise it up. It was driving obviously the high estrogen levels. The bottom line is that you ended up inheriting the lead from your mom. It's 4 generations. They estimate lead is inherited 3 to 4 generations. Why? Most of the lead is stored in the bone. It's very normal to lose bone during pregnancy, but out comes the lead from her mom that disrupted her hormones into my wife. It gets more into our children. So our firstborn, we did everything healthy and right, healthy birth, but he had
gut issues and he also had ADHD.
Just not right. He wouldn't sleep. I mean, just some things like that. Our second child, his nickname was
the Banshee.
Yeah, does that mean he screamed a lot? We were scratching our heads. What's going on? We did everything right. Only discovered their lead was off the chart. They got it from mom. 3 to 4 generations. Obviously, the message, how we ended up raising up her methylation, finally getting her hormones balanced, was dealing with the lead. I'm going to link a training below. The exact training I've been teaching doctors for 20 years on how to do heavy metal detox correctly. It's going to surprise you. It's not as simple as chelation. And matter of fact, most of that makes problems worse. And it's not as simple as just sitting in a sauna. You went through that process. We got your lead levels down. You didn't end up like your mom, obviously. But you went through menopause normal. I mean, very normal.
Very. Yeah. I don't even think I've had a hot flash.
No, exactly.
So, yes.
And she did it, did it hormone free. Yeah. But I guess what I want you to hear is it was getting rid of the lead. It was getting rid of it correctly. And that's the process that I've been blessed to teach. And you know where I learned it? My own story. In that training, I tell my story of high mercury levels. And matter of fact, I'll say it because I have her here. When I was very sick, this was all the way back in 1999, you crying out to God for an answer. What did God say to you?
He said, not only will Danny get well, but I will use him to take a message to the world.
Yeah, and
that's what you're doing.
Yes, that is exactly why everything I teach now is because of that. I get choked up thinking about that, but everything I do came from pain to purpose. That's something you coined, to a promise God has, and I believe He has for many of you as well. Watch the training below. It's information I know you've never heard before. It's information that we suffered for, but I believe out of that prophecy that God gave her, that's where every bit of that information came from. Not only is it going to get me well, He did, but I'm going to take a message to the world. Watch it. It's from Him, not me, but it'll change your life.
On the first few days. And this is why I never want patients to go through this more than once. I want them to be able to see your insulin resistance has cost you something. It takes a signal to move that glucose into the cell. So as you put them on a ketogenic diet, they don't have any carbs they're eating and their blood glucose lowers. Well, that's a great thing, right? Except if you are inside the cell. So right now, that lower glucose doesn't signal the pancreas to make as much insulin. That's the message you've trained it to do over the years. And so you're going to now see those insulin receptors bind to 3 of those insulin to bind to 3 of those receptors. Unfortunately, there's no straw moving up to the edge of that cell. Those mitochondria are hungry. They're irritated. They're sending a vibratory message saying, feed me, I'm going to die. I mean, if all of your mitochondria die, you die. And when a mitochondria suffers like that, it's just vibrating for energy because the glucose can't get to it. They crumble, they die. And so now you have less cells making energy. Okay, so you have less mouths to feed. But what that really means is that your power inside the brain, the heart, the liver, the kidney, all of it's less. So the first few days of that ketogenic diet, you're like, oh my goodness, this diet sucks. But it is the right answer. You'll see ketones show up as soon as they suffer just long enough. Now, we have ways to lessen that, but what you're really looking for is all along, you should have been offering this other fuel to those mitochondria, and you didn't. That mitochondria got to eat the easy sweets the whole time because you gave them carbohydrates day in, day out. In fact, you can tell a carbohydrate fueled body because they have to eat multiple times throughout the day. So now, eventually, as you stay in this state, those 2 receptors that aren't being used will fade, they will disappear, and your body will say, okay, now we are a 3 insulin kind of gal. This is how much it takes to get glucose into the cell, and that will now move one of the straws up to the cell.
Those of us who are suffering and you don't know why, you've done everything. Maybe you've changed your diet, you still don't feel well, you exercise, you may have said these words, I do better than most of my friends, yet I have brain fog, I have low energy, I can't lose weight anymore, or I can't get this stubborn belly fat off, whatever it is, my hair is thinning, that's who this is for. I'm going to teach you something that I've taught doctors around the world for many years. I'm going to teach you the myths in regarding to this massive, massive pandemic, the thyroid hoax, as I like to call it. But you're going to also learn about why your blood work may look normal and you still don't feel well, and you're insisting it's a thyroid problem, and your doctor's going, it looks fine to me. Or he says, okay, take this, and you take that medication, and yet you still don't feel well, and he's telling you your blood works better, and you're saying, doc, my hair is still thinning. What's going on? There is a solution to this. There is a reason why you still don't feel well. I want to pull you right into this. When I'm teaching, I'm always drawing cells. On every cell, we have hormone receptors. That means that your hormones don't work unless they actually connect to one of these receptors. In this case, that is the active thyroid hormone, and then it gets its message in the cell, all is well. Plenty of energy, brain work, digestion works, hair is good, all is well. If something is blocking these receptors to your hormones, then it doesn't matter what your blood levels look like. But the point is that the reason that the blood work looks good is because these levels of thyroid and other hormones, by the way, I could be talking about estrogen, I could be talking about testosterone, many different hormones, insulin, which I'll reference later. But the point is this is called hormone resistance. If the cell can't hear the hormone, it doesn't matter what your levels are. And unfortunately, that's where most doctors start. There's yet another problem you're going to learn about. There's inactive hormones. In this case of the thyroid, T4 is an inactive hormone. That is the hormone that most doctors give. Here's the problem. It has to convert to the active form that connects to the cell, gets its message in, and then you feel well. The problem is this conversion, as you'll see, has to happen in the liver, in the gut, and even in the kidneys. So the point is that if it's not converting, he'll give you this hormone. It will actually make the blood levels look normal, but again, you don't feel well. Oh, yet you're going to learn that there's another problem yet. In the center of the brain is a place called the pituitary. That's the control tower. That's what controls the thyroid, even your adrenals down here, and most of your hormones. What you'll see is that when we're trying to solve the problem down here and you have a problem here, then you're not going to feel well. I struggled in my own story where I had unexplainable symptoms all of a sudden, started with fatigue, and then it started getting more bizarre. All of a sudden, anxiety, couldn't sleep, panic attacks, sound sensitivity, and it went on to bizarre and unexplainable. Like most of you all, I went and got blood tests. As a matter of fact, I spent almost $5,000 on blood tests, and all to come back and say, normal, you're healthy. But there's specific causes, specific neurotoxins. Those are toxins that go deep into our nerve system, and many of them end up right here, and we're hormonally challenged. In review, it could be a problem in the brain, a neurotoxic issue. It could be a problem in the liver and gut. Oh, there's specific toxins you're going to learn about that cause hormones not to convert to their active forms. And again, it could be a problem right here in the membrane called inflammation. By the way, you're going to learn those same toxins. The number one cause of cellular inflammation is those darn toxins. But I want you to hang in there all the way to the end, because there's a specific test, the test for this causative problem right here. And that's the cellular inflammation. And then you'll also be able to access one of my experts to help you there. Let's get right into it. I did say I would say a little bit about more of who I am, but I've talked doctors around the world and the public for almost 20 years, consulted with more than 15,000 people in getting their lives back, actively traveling the country, speaking to thousands, most successful virtual online coaching program in the world, I would argue. But look at the numbers with this massive epidemic, and really, I would call it a pandemic. This is the U.S. alone, however. According to the American Association of Clinical Endocrinologists, it's called the AACE, 27 million suffers from thyroid condition. That's a pretty good source, and that's a really high number. But here, more importantly, out of the 27 million, only half have been diagnosed. Did you hear that? Out of the 27 million, only half have been diagnosed. Therefore, 50% have symptoms and do not know what's wrong. And again, it goes back to what I just showed you at the board, because blood work is not always the best indicator. Some sources say up to 90% of women age 40 and up have subclinical hypothyroid, meaning they have symptoms, but they're not being diagnosed. Is that you? According to the AACE, thyroid conditions are the #1 endocrine disorder in the US. So compared to diabetes at 16 million, thyroid's a bigger problem, but they do go, in fact, hand in hand. 80% of thyroid conditions are in women. I made that point. 80%, this is important, 80% of that percentage have hypothyroid. Now, hold on. 80% of that are autoimmune. Did you hear that? Well, Dr. Pompa, my doctor would have told me. However, maybe he didn't even run the blood work because their treatment is the same. So what's it matter? But the point is that these things should, in fact, be considered differently. All right. Thyroid disease predisposes you to many other degenerative diseases. Why aren't we hearing this? It plays a major role in obesity and diseases associated with weight gain. I think most of us understand that one at least, but older women with subclinical hypothyroid have 2 times likelihood of having blocked aorta and having a heart attack. That's scary because the #1 killer is heart attacks. And yet now we're learning that the thyroid is actually causative in this and connected to that. That should scare all of us. Studies show autoimmune types of hypothyroid, Hashimoto's, can lead to psychosis, seizures, dementia, and mood changes. Again, we are being given medications for some of these things, and yet we're not being considered that it could be an autoimmune type of thyroid. I like to deal with this. Do you have these? Cold intolerance? I did. Hair, mentioned it. Low energy, brain fog, can't lose weight. Okay, those are the classics. Those can be more diagnostic than a darn blood test. I think you should be asking, what's the solution? Okay, get rid of the cause. It sounds trite, but there's a lot of meaning to that. And I tip my hand at the board. There are specific causative factors that even functional medicine doctors are missing today and just throwing more expensive tests and vitamins and minerals at people, when in fact, you will never, ever, ever get your life back, nor could I, until you get to the cause. And man, stick with me, because I'm telling you, this is going to, in some respects, make you angry, but in other respects, you'll want to tell everyone, and hopefully you do share this with people. Anyways, what is the cause? I think is the question. Well, that depends on who you talk to, right? And your doctor will tell you it's mostly genetic. That's the truth, by the way. Unfortunately, they believe that. And I'm not blaming them. They're taught that. And there's not much you can do except take the thyroid replacement hormones, the drugs, for the rest of your life. How many of you have been told that, right? How many? Probably most of you. And you know what? There's someone making a lot of money, isn't there? The sad part is most people still have the symptoms, and their doctor now says, no, it's not related to your thyroid, right? Meaning they give you the medication, finally, probably, and then you're still going, but doc, my hair is still thinning, I'm still not losing weight, my energy still is bad, right? Well, it's not related to your thyroid. Think again. Truth is, there is a cause. And when you remove the cause, in fact, I don't heal you, no doctor does. The body does the healing. The best part is that your unexplainable symptoms go away, and I want you to understand that mostly. Fact is, my system for the thyroid, it works. It does. Prove it by the thousands of doctors that I've trained around the world. It works. If you get to the true cause, the body does in fact heal. I need to do a little bit of this first. Look at this PowerPoint. It's important because I'm going to talk, and I want you to understand what I'm talking about. I drew this on the board, right? I drew this pituitary gland. You can see my cursor here, hopefully. And the pituitary gland, though, what I didn't draw is right above it is something called the hypothalamus. This hypothalamus is a gland that gets feedback from your body, meaning how much T3 and T4, remember this is the inactive hormone, this is the active hormone, how much of that is present. And then it feeds it back to the hypothalamus, then it tells the pituitary gland to produce more of something called TSH. You're familiar with that because, as you'll see in a moment, that is the gold standard doctors use to say whether you have a problem or not, or if you have a thyroid problem or not. And if that's normal, you're normal. If it's not, you're not. Okay, so the fact is that it will tell your thyroid pituitary gland to produce that TSH, and then it is called thyroid stimulating hormone. It stimulates the thyroid to produce what? More T3 and T4. But what if there's a problem here? What if there's a problem here? And what if there's a problem down here in your cells, as I drew on the board? That's the problem with the testing. That's a problem with how we're diagnosing this. And that's a reason why this is a pandemic, when the solution is right under our nose. It frustrates me, and it should frustrate you as well. I want to go back to the board because I want you now, with that knowledge, to have a better understanding of what's going on. So as I come up here, okay, so what you learned, right? You learned that every cell has receptors to certain hormones. And if these hormones are blunted by something called inflammation, and the hormone, whether it be thyroid, estrogen, testosterone, or insulin, can't get its message in the cell, does not matter what your blood levels look like. Now, whether that is before you get put on medication or after, because some of you, eventually your blood levels do go off, and then they put you on a hormone. But again, even if they put you on T3 hormone because they feel maybe you're not converting, if it can't get its message in the cell, you don't feel well. You don't lose weight. Your brain doesn't work. You may be left constipated. You get the picture. And then we talked about the fact that something could be going on in the liver, the gut, and you don't make a normal conversion and you don't get enough of the active thyroid hormone. And then we learn that there's something in the center of the brain called the hypothalamus pituitary that actually runs our thyroid, our adrenals, and actually all of our hormones and receives the feedback. So if something's interfering here, then again, down here doesn't matter. Okay, make a lot more sense now. All right, let's go. Let's get back at it because I got a lot to do. All right, so on the thyroid gland being the only problem, contrary to what your doctor may believe, the thyroid works in synergy with the adrenal glands, the pituitary. I kind of already showed you that. I didn't talk about the pancreas, and I said the liver, even the liver, and therefore it must be considered in synergy. So in other words, you can't just deal with one thing. You have to look at the body as a whole, and you have to, instead of spare parts, right? Because that's kind of what modern medicine does, right? We want to just take things and just deal with it mechanistically with that one area, but it has to work in a synergy. So the myth then is that it's multiple organ, multiple glands. Even your gut plays an important role. How many of you have food intolerances, right? Well, maybe your functional doctor or ND told you that food intolerances actually can be a problem with their thyroid. They can, but they're still not dealing with the cause of the food intolerance. But food intolerances can cause proteins to bind to the thyroid receptor and block the hormone and cause autoimmune hypothyroidism. So that's the thing. But what I want you to realize is we're going to talk about some of these specific neurotoxins that are really the upstream problem and realize that they actually are the cause of the food intolerance. Here's the question I have for you. Is diet enough? Is a clean diet and a lifestyle change enough to really fix this pandemic? It's not working. It's not. Every year there's more thyroid conditions, and I would even argue diabetes. So it's not the diet. What's the real solution? We better get to the cause, right? If we get to the cause, therein lies the answer. That's how I got my life back. Two causes we need to address. You get it now. Cellular inflammation, right? Science acknowledges this, and I'll show you in a minute that it is the cause of most diseases today. Neurodegenerative diseases, degenerative diseases, period. Specific neurotoxins driving inflammation in the cells of the organs and glands that we mentioned, the hypothalamus, pituitary, liver, gut, etc. So specific neurotoxins is really the cause of the inflammation. So yes, science acknowledges inflammation, but no one's really talking about the cause. Inflammation, cause of all disease. But what's driving it? Well, we're digging in now. This is where you really want to pay attention. I hope I got your attention, but this is where you really want to pay attention. Both of these need addressed for a successful solution. I mentioned inflammation, but because there's so much science here, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time here, but I do want you to understand what it is. Cellular inflammation is the true underlying cause for 80 to 90% of hypothyroid conditions. Okay, we know that. That's not my opinion. That's in the literature. So what is it and why does it cause hypothyroid? Okay, when inflammation becomes chronic, meaning it's normal when it's there shortly, acutely they call that, right? When inflammation becomes chronic rather than transitory, meaning short, the body turns on itself. That means autoimmune, with an after effect that seems to underline a wide variety of conditions. And if you just look at the Time magazine, inflammation, it's the silent killer, heart disease, right? Heart attacks, cancer, Alzheimer's. And in the article, it talks about thyroid conditions as well. We know that this is what the science shows. Inflammation seems to underlie not just the senescence, that just means cells that live too long, all chronic illness. That's a strong statement from the new science of health, but all chronic illness, diabetes, atherosclerosis, Alzheimer's, heart attacks, cognitive function decline, premature aging, even cancer. This goes beyond thyroid, but it's the cause. And basically, I want you to understand this too. Of course, these toxins, as represented by these skulls, come in, attach to the cell membrane, even your mitochondria where you make energy. Once these get inflamed, you don't have energy. You can't move nutrients in your cell and toxins out. And therefore, it starts to trigger genes that get turned on, one of which could be a thyroid gene. We're going to talk more about that. But here's what I want you to understand too. You could be eating a perfect diet, taking all your supplements. When this cell is inflamed, you are not able to get those nutrients in your cell, just like the hormones can't get their message in the cell. You have a drop in ATP, which means you have a drop in energy, and you don't feel well until you get to the cell. I have a saying, if you don't fix the cell, you won't get well. And that's what I mean. In essence, we have to get to the cause of what's driving the chronic inflammation in most of America. No, most of the globe, right? I said hang in there because there is a test. This test right here is somewhere where I always start with anybody that I'm trying to help. I want to know if your cells are inflamed. It's an in-home, thank God, cellular inflammation test that's 50 times more accurate than a blood test. C-reactive protein, you may have heard of it. That's kind of the standard, 50 times more accurate than a blood test. So, and you can do it in the privacy of your own home. So you will have an opportunity at the end, hang on there, to get that test. And I don't charge you for it, but we want to know what your cells, if they're inflamed. What is the true cause of inflammation? I hope that you heard me say that, because this is where the solution lies, right here. Most expert, if they look past you're just unlucky and it's your genetics, which we already discussed, over 7,000 chemicals that only 5% are being tested for. This is the problem. They're in everything that we're using, and we're ingesting them through our bodies in every way possible. And some of the sources that I'm going to get into next are going to surprise the heck out of you. But what's happening is our buckets are overflowing at the cellular level, as I pointed out, and then our genes are getting turned on. So our doctors say, oh, it's just your genetics. No. That's old science. It's old dogma. The new science is epigenetics, meaning our hard wiring is 99.9% the same. Can you believe that? All of us humans? What's different is epigenetics, meaning it's above the gene. It's our software. That's what we can change. But unfortunately, these neurotoxins I'm about to show you, that these toxins are so nasty that they turn on these genes. But what they're not telling us is that science shows we can turn them off. So you're getting to the point. The inflammation, we have to downregulate it. We won't do it until we get to these nasties. And we can turn off the genes. We won't do it until we get to these nasties. This is what I've been teaching. And this is the first time that I'm bringing it directly to the public as opposed to just educating doctors. I said our buckets are filling. These chemicals that we're being exposed to, they're filling up our bucket. Now look, genetically, we all have a different size bucket. I like to think of it as our cells. But the fact is some of us are smaller, some of us are bigger. But once this bucket overflows, we start getting all of these symptoms, right? Unexplainable pain, temperature dysregulation, depression, mood changes. You see how many of these are linked to thyroid? Trouble sleeping, hormone dysregulation in general, headaches, fatigue, brain fog, exercise malaise, meaning you feel worse after exercise, inability to handle stress, that was me, dizziness, no reason, comes and goes, weight loss resistance, all your digestive problems, high and low blood pressure. This is a study from the Environmental Working Group showing that most of these toxins were actually inheriting from moms in utero. Yep, all of it. So this problem starts before we are even born. Now, these specific toxins, they're devastating us two ways, from mom to baby, as I just pointed out. But here's the sad part. They're transferred for 4 generations, meaning if your mom had lead, which I'm going to show you that story in a minute, my own story, that means the babies have lead. If mom has mercury, the babies have mercury. You get the point. Now, the second problem is they're transferred epigenetics. I mentioned this. This is the new science on genes. That means that if mom's gene is turned on for a thyroid condition or weight loss resistance, so could yours. Here's the proof personally. This is my wife's lead level. Keep in mind, back when this test was done, under 5 was normal. She was 69. Now it's under 2. So my wife, and I won't get into details, however, she had some hormone challenges that were occurring that we were trying to address. We actually did a urine hormone and saw that she wasn't getting rid of a toxic estrogen that was building up. Her mother ended up with breast cancer. She did standard treatments. She was considered a success for that. 10 years later, she ended up with uterine cancer, and 2 years later died. My wife was heading down that exact same road. The difference was this. When her mother, her name was Joyce, I said, Joyce, if you don't get to the cause of what caused the breast cancer originally, you're going to end up with another estrogen-dominant cancer. She never got to the cause. In this case, thank God we did. My wife's lead level was off the chart. That's why she wasn't getting rid of the toxic estrogen. There's something called methylation, and toxins deplete it. And if you deplete methylation, you don't get rid of toxic hormones. But here's what I want you to see. My son, this is his test. All of my biological children ended up with certain gut problems and certain health challenges that one day it hits. And I said, oh my gosh, my wife's lead went into them. And I think I read a study showing what happens in pregnancy is most lead is stored in the bones. And it's very normal to lose lead during pregnancy. And out came the lead during pregnancy into the kids. And then now you're seeing that expression into one of my kids. So the point is, you have to get to the cause. And there's our whole family. And the only reason I show you this picture is because all 7 of us have our own battle. We adopted Dylan and Olivia. They're twins. Dylan and Olivia had severe mercury toxicity. And there's a whole story about that. Dylan was on the autism spectrum. If you met him now, you'd never know that. And Olivia dealt with major challenges with fibromyalgia type symptoms as a teenager. And she's now a doctor. So pain to purpose. Mercury generation, this is what got me. These are the major sources of mercury that are causing this massive pandemic. And by the way, if I went back up to the board, I would draw mercury on these receptors, even on the receptors on the thyroid, because mercury is attracted to a receptor that uses selenium. It's called a selenium receptor, and it attracts mercury. And therefore, then it causes the body to attack itself. So mercury is highly linked to thyroid conditions. This is the number one source, these silver fillings that contain 50% mercury. Of course, certain vaccines have been linked. And of course, I wore contact lenses. This saline was the number one adult source until the early 90s. And so I had this, unfortunately, as one of mine. So this is the final part of my story, that mercury vapor from amalgam and from contact lens fluid, that went into the brain, specifically the hypothalamus pituitary. That's what controls the thyroid, the adrenals, and most of our hormone systems. So many people. And by the way, if your mother had the fillings, as you'll see, that could be a problem for you, even if you never had a filling in your mouth. Brain mercury is the problem. And this is what studies show. And unfortunately, most people, even if they thought they had it, they go, oh, my doctor did a mercury detox and I did saunas. Not so simple. You have to get the stuff out of that center brain. That's how I got my life back. That's the only way you're going to normalize that hormone function. There's a specific way I've been teaching for almost 20 years on exactly how to get that stuff out of that center brain. That's how you normalize hormones. But look at this. The amount of mercury, ladies, or the amount of fillings in your mouth is proportional to how much on autopsy studies they found in the baby's brain. It starts in utero, doesn't it? Remember, physical inheritance, epigenetics. If you don't believe me, that's mercury vapor coming off of that 25-year-old filling, and that mercury is going right into the brain. All they did is rub it with a pencil eraser like chewing, and you just watch that mercury vapor pour off. Hot coffee, hot tea, mercury vapor into the brain, where maybe it takes 30 years of accumulation in that brain. In the pituitary hypothalamus is where most of it goes, disrupting the hormone system. I wouldn't be sitting here if I didn't figure that out. Every time I would address my thyroid and my adrenals and some of my hormone challenges downstream, some things would get worse, but I wasn't getting better until I realized the problem was there. And again, that's not all your problems, because some of it's just at the cellular level, but there's a specific way that this detox has to be done. And that's what I get passionate about. How many of you have these symptoms? Sound sensitivity, had it, right? Inability to concentrate, brain fog, abnormal menses, low body temperature. I mean, go through it. Insomnia, right? Funguses, nail fungus, unexplainable anger, dizziness, irritability, digestive issues, anxiety, depression. Those are mercury symptoms, folks. Glyphosate makes it all worse. What is glyphosate? It's a chemical that's in almost all of our food. And they say 60% of the rain. Here's the problem. This 2012 study, I know Stephanie Seneff personally. She's a senior scientist at MIT. She showed that this chemical that we're all being exposed to makes these neurotoxins that we've been exposed to since birth or in utero go deeper into our brain, into our cells, into our nerve system. It's making this problem a perfect storm. Think about it. 3 stressors come together and boom, all of a sudden the gene is triggered. It's in all of our food as positioned there. Take this 30-second neurotoxic quiz. If you have 6 out of these 10, you've got a problem. If you have 10 out of 10, boy, I'll tell you, you better be running for the answer. But you can just glance at them. I'll give you a moment. It was less than 30 seconds, but most of you read fast. You get the point. So what's the answer? You better remove the source. If the problem is at the cell, the answer is at the cell. This is my message. Real detox has to be at the cell. I said this. My saying is, if you fix the cell, you get well, but the problem is toxins. So more specifically, we have to detox our cells to get well. You see my passion, I hope. That system is something that saved my life. I only know it not because of my school. I only know it because I went through what I went through. My passion has been teaching doctors that, but I realized taking it directly to the person in a program is the magic. And you're going to have an opportunity to see that. But I want to say this, and if you look at the screen in front of you, there's something that I call 97%ers and 3%ers. 3%ers are people who change the world. They just simply make a choice that I'm going to get better no matter what. And I remember the day that I made the choice. 97%ers are people who, well, frankly, have a lot of reasons why it's not the time. They function in their fear. They fear like, oh, okay, this is going to be another thing that I try, spend money on, and I don't get better. All right, that's 97%ers. I hope you hear my heart. I have the real answer. And I'm not boasting that it's an answer that I cleverly came up with. No, it's an answer I believe in my heart that God gave me to, like my wife was right, not only to get my life back, but she knew that I would be taking it to the world. So God put you here for a reason. Choose to be a 3%er. 97%ers, they get stuck in their fear. Look, it's not that 3%ers don't have fear. They do, believe me, and they have doubt, but they just make a choice and they do it anyway. It's a choice. It's a choice. To be a 3%er is the choice. Those are the people that get well. Those are the people that change the world. All right, if you want my help, here it is. A comprehensive cellular health analysis. It's $297. That's what it costs. Well, I'm not going to charge you that today. And by the way, a comprehensive cellular analysis, you're meeting with one of my experts that I meet with and train every week. Doesn't matter where you live because we do it on Zoom or phone. And you will meet, as I told you, with one of my experts whom I train weekly, and they will assess with you what was the cause of your cellular dysfunction and your thyroid problem. And I hope you understand that that's really what matters. Okay, you're also going to get the cellular inflammation kit that I told you about. This is what I said is your first step. So, and I'm not going to charge you for that either. I told you I wouldn't. That's the test, just to put it in context. That's the test that's 50 times more accurate than a blood test. And I mentioned you can do it in the privacy of your own home, and you will just send us the results. Okay. You also get the cellular health analysis. This is just in review. The cellular inflammation test, that's the value. So $297.99 value. That's a total of $396 that I'm not charging you for. I also need you to take the neurotoxicity assessment. That's a $99 value. I'm not going to charge you that today because I want you to do this. I do, obviously. After coaching hundreds and thousands of doctors, these are questions, specific symptoms that if it walks like a duck, quacks like a duck, it must be a duck. Yeah. So over 20 years of putting that together, I need you to take that assessment. So this is what you get all together. You get the cellular health analysis, the meta-oxy or the urine test for the cellular inflammation, the neurotoxic assessment, and that is a $495, so basically a $500 value. And today, I'm giving it to you for $167. So I don't know what more I can do to move you forward and to change your life. You saw the truth, you heard the truth, you heard where it came from. Make the choice. Be a 3%er. But I want to end here. This is a Hebrew statement, Rak Kazak Amatz. In the Bible, in particular, Rak Kazak Amatz is used every time someone's about ready to step into a promise that God has for them. And I believe that you are here for a reason. I also believe that you have a promise, just like we all have a purpose, but it's a choice. But I want to finish with Rak Kazak Amatz. The English translation doesn't do it justice. The English translation is be strong and courageous. But just to summarize the Hebrew words and what it means God's already gone forward into what you fear, into the promise that he has for you. And he's beat back the enemy. He's given you the victory. Simpler than that. It's him, not you. He's paved the way for you. As Israel crossed the Jordan, as they were crossing the Jordan, all they saw was 31 armies that wanted to take them out. And God spoke through Joshua, Rak Kazak Amatz, Israel, meaning I've taken it for you. As Joshua went before Moses on his deathbed, how am I going to take them into the promise? God spoke through Moses to Joshua, Rak Kazak Amatz, Joshua, and it's throughout the Bible. So my words to you is Rak Kazak Amatz. 3%er, take the choice, step into your promise. That simple.